So now I'm going to introduce our speaker. We are so lucky to have Stephen Hayna. He is observed, written about, and participated in Virginia public affairs for 4 decades. He's done it from an unusual combination of perspectives as a newspaper reporter, a Republican political operative, a state agency manager, and a lobbyist. He is now retired from practice as an independent government affairs public relations consultant, doing business as Black Walnut Strategies, along with serving as contributing editor for Bacon's Rebellion. I know a lot of you read Bacon's Rebellion. Steve has taken on the role of senior fellow for state and local tax policy at the Thomas Jefferson Institute for Public Policy. His previous full-time positions include manager of state government affairs for Huntington Ingalls Industries, parent company of Newport News Shipbuilding, Virginia's largest industrial concern and government contractor, vice president for public policy of the Virginia Chamber of Commerce, which we call the Chamber of Looters, serving as the chief lobbyist for Virginia's premier statewide business advocacy group, director of administration, Office of the Attorney General, the only non-attorney on the senior management team of what was then Virginia's 3rd largest law firm, executive director of the Joint Republican Caucus. After 18 months as state party press secretary, became the first full-time executive of the former Joint Caucus. On his watch, the caucus membership increased 14 seats despite the Democratic House gerrymandering of 1991. Staff writer of Roanoke Times, serving as the paper's political writer for 2 years. He covered his first elections in 1977 and helped cover 1981 through 1985 gubernatorial elections. He won both internal writing awards, one for featured writing and other for news writing. It was at the Roanoke Times that fate brought Steve and Jim Bacon together. He and his wife Pam reside in Henrico County. Both are graduates of the College of William and Mary. Can I please have a nice warm welcome for Steve Hayna.
No, I don't mind having to record it, but it just means I need to sort of stay here.
Well, you can see where you're at there.
Yeah, I got it. So I didn't know whether to bring a PowerPoint or what, so I'm just going to sort of ad lib it, and I'll use the microphone since it's being recorded and try to read my notes, but I'll probably end up getting all messed up. So again, my principal topic tonight is going to be energy and the energy issues down at the General Assembly. And in going through that entire resume, this is related mostly to my time at Newport News Shipbuilding. So I went to the shipyard in 2006 as their lobbyist. Huge electricity user, as you would expect. Buys a lot of electricity, buys a lot of now natural gas as well for its operation. So we were very involved in the energy issues, and sometimes we were friends with the utility, and sometimes we were fighting the utility because, like everybody else, we didn't want to pay any more than we had to. So that's what got me interested in these issues. And now for the last 10 years, and really deeply for the last 4 or 5 years, I've paid very close attention to the issues related to climate change and all the green energy stuff. And then again, how it's being presented and how we deal with it in this country. I mean, there's a Times-Dispatch headline from last week, which 2 weeks ago, I guess, 3 weeks ago, was the funniest thing I've ever seen. It said, extreme weather hits every U.S. region and won't let up. I mean, like, the story was that everywhere in the entire 50 states, there's something terrible going on with the weather. This, of course, was the silliest headline I've ever seen in 50 years. But that's what we get now. We get this constant barrage from the news media that every single weather event, every single storm, every single drought, every single rain event is climate change. It is being caused by natural gas and by carbon dioxide. So again, too much rain, too little rain, any old storm, any heat wave. Now, if it's really nice, and we've actually had a pretty nice spring and summer here so far, the Times-Dispatch had a story recently saying, well, yeah, it's been really nice, but the bad stuff is coming. that was the actual story, that the bad stuff is coming. So don't get too comfortable because it's going to get hot again and we're going to be in real trouble. this whole threat of climate change and the effort to blame it on one gas, in my opinion, is almost destroying our economy. And we're seeing it now. If I said that a year ago, there would have been a lot fewer people nodding their heads yes. But now that we've seen what's going on with the price of gas and the price of natural gas and the price of anything else related to energy, we can see what's going on. We're going through what I consider to be the first renewable energy war, because Putin is doing what he's doing because he knows the Europeans can't fight it. The Europeans need his gas, they need his oil, they need his coal when he was shipping coal. They have put themselves under the thumb of the renewable crowd, and when the wind and the sun don't work, they have got to burn oil and gas, and he got it. He's got it. So, you know, they have completely, you know, he would never have attacked them. He never would have attacked Ukraine if Europe was not so completely under his control. And yet, this whole climate change theory is completely, you know, accepted as central to the Democratic Party right now. And there's no shortage of Republicans who believe it as well, as you know. So it's become, in my opinion, one of the most powerful ideas out there. Our main electric utility, Dominion, and you know this better than anybody, is about to build this monster offshore wind project 27 miles off Virginia Beach. It will be it'll be owned by one company. There's not a different supplier, it's just them. That means all of us as their customers are on the hook for the expense, on the hook. More importantly, if something goes wrong, and this will be the first offshore wind project built in hurricane territory. There's never been one built in hurricane territory. They're building them in the North Sea. There's definitely some wind issues in the North Sea. It's not exactly without storms up there, but they do not have hurricanes in the North Sea. As you know, and it's 176 turbines. And what most people don't realize, it's going to cover 175 square miles of ocean. 113,000 acres, 175 square miles. And as many of you know, that's just the first one. There's another one brewing off Kitty Hawk. And that's important to Virginia because they're going to bring the power line to Sandbridge. The power line will come up to Sandbridge and they'll hook into the grid there. So they bring in this giant, you know, 2,000 or 3,000 gigawatt power line onto Sandbridge. The Biden administration is looking at offshore leasing areas all the way up and down the East Coast, out beyond the continental shelf. This project for Dominion is like 2.5 gigawatts. Biden wants to do 110 gigawatts. That's like a country worth of power, except of course, and we'll get into this, it doesn't work all the time. So all across Virginia, then there's the solar. And you're seeing it in this area, you're seeing a lot along Southside Virginia. A lot of farmland, a lot of forest land is being plowed under and for solar panels. And in some cases, it's not for the utility; it's a private company who buys the land, builds the solar plant, and sells the power into the grid or sells the power to anyone who wants to buy it. But a lot of them are utility owned, and either way, we end up paying for them because the power gets bought. Now, the General Assembly, and I'll talk about this in a minute, did put some constraints on that with a fairly good bill that passed this year and got signed, and it will go into effect. I know it's a good bill because the solar industry is screaming bloody murder, so it must have been a good bill. But they're complaining about some of the new restrictions they've got. But again, if you're a Republican, if you're a conservative, property rights are important. If someone wants to use their land to grow electrons instead of growing corn, well, I'm inclined to say, okay, that's not exactly a bad, you know, it's your choice, it's your land. But I still think there's a lot of state issues and a lot of regulation. And again, as the consumer, we end up paying for it, especially if it doesn't work. The other big aspect of this issue, of course, is natural gas. I'm gonna get into this a little bit more too. And in the Hampton Roads area in particular, you've got a natural gas problem. It's not that widely known, but your area is short of natural gas. And the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is going to come down and help you with that issue to kill that. There's a Mountain Valley Pipeline out in the western part of the state. They're doing their best to kill that. Virginia Natural Gas had a proposal to bring extra natural gas to Hampton Roads through Charles City County. And that ran into some problems because one of the buyers ended up going belly up. But they scrapped that. So you're not getting that supply. There's one more project out there, Columbia Gas, that's trying to bring new supply to Hampton Roads. And again, it's a couple years off, but the battle has already begun. Another aspect of all this, of course, is the carbon tax. the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI. You've heard Governor Youngkin talking about RGGI. Well, and he promised to get rid of it. And I think he's going to try to get rid of it, but it's still there. We're still paying it. There was an auction in June. There'll be an auction in September. And Dominion is having to buy those RGGI credits, and Dominion is going to pass that cost along to its customers. So until he actually changes the reg, and I think that process will start next month. I know a member of the Air Board, he said they're going to meet in August. But until they start that process, we're still part of RGGI. And I fully expect as soon as they make a move, there will be a lawsuit. So we'll have to deal with that. But natural gas, of course, is not just about supply. There's an awful lot of cities around the country, including now in Virginia, who are trying to regulate natural gas out of existence. Los Angeles, just this week, was the latest to pass a resolution or pass an ordinance. If you live in Los Angeles and build a new house, build a new commercial building, build a new restaurant, you cannot install natural gas.
Wow.
And they don't really have the power to get rid of the stuff that's already there yet. They'll figure that out. But right now they're just stopping it from growing. So you say they're crazy in California. There's 50 cities that have done that. Richmond City Council has passed that very resolution. Wow. Richmond City Council and Fairfax County has a climate change plan that involves trying to figure out ways to wean people off natural gas. So again, they want the natural gas out of your house, out of your business, out of your restaurant, and gone. So again, there are 5 key points, and I'll make these points a couple times, and then I'll take some questions. And again, the first one is something I'll get a lot of debate on in some circles, maybe not here, maybe I will get some debate here. There is no catastrophic climate change. I mean, there is climate change. There's nothing new about climate change, but there's no catastrophic climate change outside of the models. They keep running these models about 50 years from now, 75 years from now, 100 years from now. It's all in the models. If you look at what's actually going on, even where there is change, there's no catastrophe. There's no increase in wildfires. It's the same number. Matter of fact, it's lower than it was 50 years ago. The hottest decade in the United States was the 1930s. And my wife and I were both born in September of 1954. And our mothers told us that was one of the hottest months in the entire, in the entire United States, the history of the United States. And if you look at those monthly reports, you keep seeing 1954 is the highest on this date, September 1st, September 2nd, September 3rd. A lot of those dates in September 1954 are still the max. But to listen to these guys, of course, we're suffering through the hottest weather in the history of mankind. There is no catastrophic climate change. There is absolutely no hard evidence that what we do see going on is being caused by these greenhouse gases. I mean, I can't say they have no effect. They certainly have some effect, but they can't prove it's the major cause. But again, absent evidence, they don't care. Even though, despite point 1 and point 2, the United States, Western Europe, and many other countries have been lowering our carbon dioxide footprint. We have been emitting a lot less carbon dioxide. Virginia's down 25%. Even though there's more people and more economic activity, we're putting out a lot less carbon dioxide mainly because we switched from coal to natural gas, we are implementing some of the renewables. But the coal was the big culprit, and if you move the coal to natural gas, you make a huge difference. But what we do in this country only matters if it's worldwide, and it's not. Russia, China, India, Indonesia, Africa, they're building coal plants. They're going to keep building coal plants. So the CO2 that everybody says is the key is just going to keep going up. That's number 3. Number 4, wind and solar, despite all their benefits, and they certainly have some, are not reliable energy. They're intermittent. The technology itself, the wind turbines themselves, the solar panels have a very short lifespan. Even if they work perfectly, it's 25 or 30 years. So in 25 years, we'll be taking all this stuff out. It'll be heading for landfills or recycling. A lot of the expense of taking these things out is not built into the price. That'll be a new expense in 20 years for our kids and our grandkids. They are not reliable. What they need to be reliable is a huge amount of solar backup. Battery backup. No one's talking about that, but that's what they need. And then point number 5, from a purely efficiency standpoint, the fossil fuels are way better. I mean, they're gonna be hanging on because they actually work. I brought this, I'll show it to you, maybe I'll pass it around. I'm also a big advocate for nuclear. Of course, I worked for a nuclear shipyard for 12 years, so that's to be expected. And this is a little pellet. This is a mock-up of a pellet of nuclear fuel, like Dominion uses at Surrey and North Anna. That's just like one pellet. That one pellet is the equivalent of 149 gallons of oil.
Wow.
1 ton of coal for 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas. I have no idea, but it's probably 10 acres of solar to replace the fuel in for an hour or 2 hours of that one little fuel pellet. So again, there is no climate catastrophe. CO2 is not the proven culprit for what we do see going on. US and Europe are cutting CO2, but the rest of the world is not. Wind and solar by themselves are a disaster, and fossil fuels will continue to remain a mainstay. And if not fossil fuels, then it has to be nuclear. We have to have some kind of base backup. Virginia is on a path to economic disaster right now because of everything the General Assembly did in 2020 and 2021. Some of the bad policies, and they before that they were passing other bills, but in 2020 and 2021 they just went crazy because they had complete control. And the governor and the Senate and the House. The big driving statute on electricity, of course, is the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which is the one that mandates the offshore wind. I have to admit that 2 Republicans did vote for the Virginia Clean Economy Act in 2020. Everybody else opposed it. But in 22, when it came back for repeal in the House, every Republican voted to repeal it, including the one who had voted for it 2 years earlier. We won't mention Jerry Kilgore's name. And I know why he did it, and I can tell you why he did it, but it's kind of a long story. And then, but it went over to the Senate. And in the Senate, of course, it got bottled up in a Democrat-controlled committee, and it died. The Virginia Clean Economy Act puts a deadline of 2045 on Dominion. By 2045, Dominion needs to be net zero, which means it all has to be either renewable power or they have to be paying a REC, paying a renewable energy credit. They can keep their coal, some of their fossil fuel operations going for a while. The deadline for Appalachian in the western part of the state is 2050, but Appalachian has no coal plants left in Virginia, so it doesn't really affect Appalachian. Appalachian gets its power from West Virginia and Ohio, so it doesn't really affect Appalachian. The BCEA spells out minimum amounts of solar, minimum amounts of offshore wind, battery storage. It sets deadlines on when the coal plants and the gas plants have to close. There's a whole lot of, it's a gigantic bill. It's still being developed exactly how it's going to affect us. The offshore wind, as I said, is pending at the SCC. Within a couple of weeks, I expect the SCC will approve it. Because of the way the law is written, they can't turn it down. It's deemed to be reasonable and prudent by the law. So what the General Assembly has done is basically they've decided that we're going to have at least 3,000 megawatts of offshore wind. Dominion is talking about a second phase as well. They really want to go to about 5,000 megawatts of offshore. BCEA dictates when the coal and natural gas plants will close, but I think the gas plants, at least some of them, will run for probably another 20 years. That's good news because it means we may not be like Texas, we may not be like Europe this winter. We may not find ourselves with blackouts and brownouts and calls from Dominion to shut off our air conditioners or shut off our washing machines because we've got backup gas power. The bad news is we're basically paying for 2 power systems. We're paying for the solar and the wind, and we're paying for the natural gas, but only one of them is going to be running at a time. And that's why it's going to cost so much. Because solar and wind fail all the time by design. Offshore wind, this project, even the one that Dominion is touting, 40% capacity factor. So they say it's 2,600 megawatts. That's like thousands and thousands of houses you could run with. But what they don't advertise is it only runs 40% of the time. The wind doesn't always blow. So, it's 2,600 megawatts times 40%. If you want the steady state value of it, it's about 1,100 megawatts. Solar is even worse. Solar is like 25% because it goes off at night, goes off. Today was a reasonably cloudy day. A couple of days ago, we had a very cloudy day. And if it rains for 5 days, and it can, you're getting virtually no solar power. There are these wonderful websites for PJM, which is our regional power group, There's another one I look at about Europe. They're actually tracking minute by minute where the power is coming from. It's coming from coal. It's coming from natural gas. It's coming from nuclear. That's where it's coming from. At this point, PJM almost never even hits 5% renewable. If it does hit renewable, it's about 5 or 6% of their total power. That's the entire region, Middle Atlantic region, is all part of one big power cooperative called PJM Interconnect. It's just not going to work, you know. And that's the problem I've had with it all along. And at the shipyard, I worked on some offshore wind development projects because they were very interested, of course, in manufacturing stuff. They could build stuff there, and if they could build the pylons and things like that and be part of the project. But you know, I've become convinced that it's just not going to work. Pay attention to what's going on in Europe, because they rely, certainly 4 countries, Germany, England, Denmark, and the Netherlands, rely very heavily on offshore wind. And they have some of the highest power rates in the world. And they also have real issues because when the wind doesn't blow, they've got a problem. Earlier this week, Texas put out a warning to people to turn off their air conditioners, turn off their washing machines. And that was because they were getting 8% capacity factor on their wind. That's all they were getting was 8%. You know, there have been figures out there about the cost. I've used figures about the cost. I think the cost is hard to estimate. I mean, I just tell people to plan on the cost of energy going up faster than inflation for the next 10 to 20 years. If inflation is 3 or 4%, expect energy to go up 6 or 8%. It's just going to keep going up. In Dominion's case, it's the fuel factor. Now they've gotten the nuclear extended, and that's great. I'm glad they extended the nuclear, but that's going to cost money. We'll be paying for that. And the offshore wind will come online in September. We'll start paying for that in September. So again, let's talk about RGGI. RGGI is another scheme like BCEA to basically force our energy companies to stop burning fossil fuels. It's got a slow ratchet target that comes down every year. Compared to BCEA, actually, RGGI's easy. I mean, we're meeting the RGGI goals. Dominion was meeting the RGGI goals before RGGI was ever proposed. You know, RGGI's about the money. That's what they want. I mean, RGGI's not about reducing carbon. RGGI's about the money, and the tax was adding up to about $300 million a year. Half of it was going to low-income families to have weatherization and swap out their air conditioners for more efficient air conditioners and all that stuff. And half of it was going to coastal flooding projects. And I'm all for the coastal flooding projects. But again, the RGGI's is about the money. So VCA should be repealed, and we should get out of RGGI. You know, when it comes to VCA getting out of RGGI, the governor has worked very hard on that. I have to tell you, I'm disappointed, but during the last session, the governor was not any help on repealing VCA. Wait a minute, as they say in the ads, there's more. Let's depress you further. Let's talk about transportation. Because again, another genius idea our Democrat friends came up with, and they didn't invent this. We are now basically under the thumb of the California Air Resources Board. If you want to buy a car after about 2025, 2026, you will be following regulations coming out of Sacramento. Actually, I found out the California Air Resources Board's offices are in Riverside, but you'll be coming out of California. And they are publishing guidelines that say in 2025, 30-some% have to be EVs. The dealers have to sell nothing but EVs till they hit these targets. And each year it goes up until by 2035, the dealers can't sell any internal combustion engines, cars or trucks at all. It's all got to be zero emission vehicles. The technology will probably be better by 2035, but I doubt the cost is going to come down very much. So that's the rule. And Virginia, by passing this regulation, it's like on autopilot. If California decides to change the rules, we just follow it. Now, again, the governor, I mean, there was a bill put in that would have stopped all that. Gee, guess what happened? The House, Karen and her friends all voted for it. They got out of the House, 52, 53, and then maybe a couple Democrats may have voted for it. They got out of the House, went to the Senate, and died in the committee. So again, with the VCEA, along with the environmental groups, obviously Dominion and some of the other big businesses, the wind companies, the solar companies, they love that bill. And they provided a lot of political muscle to help the environmentalists get it through. In the case of the transportation stuff, it's the auto dealers. You may not realize this, but the auto dealers were very, very involved in passing that bill. Ford, Toyota, all those big companies are heavily invested in moving to EVs. They're doing it mainly because that's what California market's going to make them do. I mean, that's what happens when California can drive the market. So they're passing these bills around the country to create a market for their EVs. And so, yes, I mean, the Don Hall of the auto dealers spoke in favor of and helped push that bill through. You know, I'm not against electric vehicles. I think they're great. The Teslas are beautiful. You know, one of my neighbors has one, but it should be a choice, not a mandate. And that's my big issue. If you want to do it, fine, but it should be a choice, not a mandate. So again, I talked a little bit about natural gas. You know, Richmond City Council, the beauty of what Richmond is doing is it doesn't just affect Richmond. So Richmond passed a resolution. Let me back up a little bit more. Richmond is one of the only cities left in Virginia that owns its own natural gas company. You know, you go back 50, 75 years, a lot of the cities ran gas companies, just like they ran electric companies and trolleys and everything else. And Richmond still has a gas company and does so because it still makes money off of it. It's actually a pretty good moneymaker for the city. And it's a big moneymaker because it's not just Richmond. I mean, it goes back to before all this annexation, before the counties got politically strong. So we live 10 miles out of town in Henrico County, but we've got Richmond gas. All of Henrico basically is Richmond gas. About half of Chesterfield is Richmond gas. Even into Hanover County, it's Richmond gas. And one of the reasons they serve those areas is because that's what the big industries are. So they serve the big industry. They serve Altria. They serve a lot of the other big industries that drive up that 95 corridor. You see all those factories. They're almost all run on natural gas. So Richmond City Council passes this resolution saying, we don't like natural gas. It's going to ruin the planet. So we think we need to get out of the natural gas business. They didn't have any details, no deadlines, but they did pass the resolution. So a bunch of us looked at it and said, you know, there's absolutely nothing in state law that would stop them. They can just do that. There's no law that gives anybody a right to say, wait a minute, I'm your customer, you can't do that to me. So, you know, they put a bill in this year. I think the governor did stand behind that one. Gee, can you finish the sentence for me? It passed the House and it died in the Senate. Now, the Senate did pass out a fairly weak substitute, but it doesn't change the basic law. It doesn't change what Richmond could do if it wanted to. It does say that before Richmond shuts down the gas company, they have to at least see if someone might want to buy it. But nothing in the bill as it stands now says they have to take the deal. They could still just shut down their gas company. Now, it's interesting, that bill is actually, it was approved at the veto session a couple of weeks ago. It hadn't been communicated yet. It's just sitting somewhere. So it's not gone to the governor. He could send down amendments, whether he will or not, I don't know. If it were me, I could suggest some amendments to that bill. So anyway. I mean, you know, just Sunday, there was a column in the Richmond Times-Dispatch about how terrible Richmond's gas is. Richmond Gas Company was going to spend $100 million on investing, improving their system, and this person attacked it. There's this publication some of you may have seen called Virginia Mercury.
Yes.
They do a very nice job. It's very clean, very, very visually beautiful. The writers involved are former newspaper reporters. It's clean copy, but they're very, very biased.
Yes.
And there's a woman who writes there named Ivy Main, who works for Sierra Club, and she had a column, you know, attacking natural gas. So again, they have not given up on the natural gas thing. Just because it's California, if they stay in power, they will do it in Virginia. And they can do, again, like I said, they can go after building codes, they can go after new attachments, new expansions. There's a lot of way they can put pressure. I mean, that Columbia Gas proposal to bring more supply to Hampton Roads, in my opinion, that's 10 times more important to your economy right here than the offshore wind. If that fails, that is a major problem for your economy that will not be made up for by this offshore wind. Because again, you see all these wonderful proposals of how wonderful that, yeah, we're going to have an industry here, we're going to be building the turbines here, we're going to be building the pylons here. I actually know the economist who wrote those reports. I actually had beer with him 2 nights ago at Hardywood in Richmond. He will tell you that's all premised on having natural gas to run the factories. If there's no natural gas, there's no offshore wind industry. That's how they build them over here. You know, ask your green friends about that sometime. anyway, there's, a lot going on. I'm going to stop, right now, but I'm going to go through my 5 key points again, just because repetition. And then I want to take questions for a while, because I'm curious what you guys think are asking about. So again, my basic premise, no climate catastrophe outside of the computer models. CO2 is not the culprit for what we see going on. It's not proven to be. It's certainly going to have a factor, but it's not proven to be the culprit. Even though it's not, we in this country are working pretty hard to lower our CO2 output. And most of us have bought more efficient cars. Most of us are happy to buy more efficient cars. Most of us are happy to have, moving from coal to natural gas. But the rest of the world is ignoring all that. And so it's not going to have, in terms of the international amount, it's going to keep going up. Wind and solar by themselves would be a total disaster. And we're going to have backup in the fossil fuels. Again, for electric power, it could be nuclear or it could be natural gas. But for transportation, it's mainly going to be fossil fuels. I mean, the electric vehicles, there was another story this week about the Europeans, the British are using these electric vehicles in their police cars. They're not getting the speed. They're not getting the punch they need. They're not working. I've got 3 friends back here. Anyway, at this point, I'll take a break and I'll take questions.
Okay, if you would raise your hand, let me call on you. Okay, Pat?
You didn't mention anything about water turbines. Are we still trying to push those through because?
You mean
power
ocean waves
Yes,
or like a hydropower?
through the ocean? Yeah.
Well, the ocean wave technology, they were working on that at the shipyard when I was there. The impression I get is it just hasn't proven to be that effective. They have not gotten the kind of output they thought. Now, hydropower is another matter. I mean, if you can get the political will to dam a river, build a lake, and put the turbines in, that's a very efficient, very effective way to make electricity. And Europe uses a lot more hydropower than we do, but we do use a lot in this country. And hydropower shows up every day on that PJM list. We have Smith Mountain Lake, which is a hydro plant. We have Claytor Lake in Southwest Virginia is a hydro plant, and the Bath County storage facility, when they run it, that's a hydro plant. So hydro is a highly efficient. And again, the battle there is getting the permits and getting permission to build it. I remember when Newport News was trying to do a reservoir for its city water and was going up in like King William County, I think. It was a huge battle. I mean, people did not want that reservoir. Well, that's what you face every time you try and put, essentially, put 1,000 acres on the water to build that kind of facility. Yes, sir.
I was
Yeah.
working on the idea of that wave motion, which works really well, I was told. I also came up with, and the ends of where the generators are, you would have mounted 50, 75 feet above the water solar cells, which are easy accessible, can be changed, can be cleaned very easily, they're accessible. Plus, you can have a beacon at the top to let ships know that they're there.
Okay. Well, again, I think, like I said, I think the issue was how much power do you get for how much cost it takes. But again, in terms of the theory, you're right. It's perfectly theoretically possible.
Leslie's next, and then Todd.
If the people that want to restrain us from using fossil fuels and natural gas, and they're afraid of nuclear, it seems to me that some of the riots that are going on overseas have to do with their limiting their power structure, and that we're going to turn into a third world country if they continue this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the unrest overseas, it's not so much about the power as it's the cost. Because when they do that, obviously the retailers. You remember the yellow vests in Paris a few years ago?
Yeah, but Sri Lanka.
That was all about the fuel taxes. When the fuel taxes went up in France, that blew up. They've had problems right now in Sri Lanka because they're dealing with the agriculture sector. And again, I haven't really talked much about the agriculture sector, but they're after the agriculture sector too. And then in the Netherlands right now, same deal. I mean, they're dealing with telling the farmers you have to cull your herds and get rid of a lot of your cows.
I think we're going to stop.
And you go to England and they're putting these masks on to capture the burps. Wonderful photograph of, of course, there's one of the leading advocates out there if the world's going to end in 10 years is Prince Charles. So there's this great photograph of Prince Charles standing next to the cow. I mean, if you believe this stuff, if you know, and again, and in my opinion, it's a matter of belief because the science isn't there. If you believe it's really that bad, and it's going to get that bad this fast, then what they're saying makes sense. You know, that's the basic premise. I mean, you know, I just don't think it's true. I just don't think what we're seeing in terms of some temperature rises, what we're seeing in terms of some sea level rise, is anything that can be blamed on your Ford truck. I just don't think you can. I mean, I think a lot of it is natural variation that's been going on for hundreds of years, or thousands of years, or millions of years.
Okay, Ty.
Thanks.
So so I hear that the power grids for the different types of energy, are they compatible? Is it that you can take the wind and solar
Yeah.
and just feed it right into?
Yeah, I mean, it's all electrons. It's all electrons. The electrons feed into the grid.
Because they talk about the not that we don't have the infrastructure. If we did have the wind and solar, enough of it that it's not laid out.
Well, again, you do have to build the transmission lines. I mean, if you with this offshore wind of that $10 billion, about $1.5 billion of it's just the transmission lines. And you've got to bring, and again, they made the decision to build it 27 miles offshore, mainly so you wouldn't be able to see it so easily from the shore. I get that. But that means that's 27 miles of cable, undersea cable. And they're going to be the biggest undersea cables in the world. I mean, no one's built a power plant that size in one location. None of the ones in Europe are 26 gigawatts, 2.6 gigawatts. They're smaller than that. They're going to build more of that size, but that'll be one of the first ones that size. So these giant power cables are coming ashore. But yes, I mean, they figured out how to take the solar and the wind and feed it into the grid. And on a good day, when the solar is running, you know, it's bright and sunny. On a good day, when the wind's 25 miles an hour, steady state, it's cheap. There's no question about it. They are cheap when they run. The problem is they don't run all the time. And the other problem is we don't know how long they're going to last.
Okay. Doug and then Toby.
On the wind turbines, I drive down Elizabeth City, I see all
Oh,
the
yeah.
ones are out there. Half the time, some are running, other times, some are not. And when you go back to where you said the hurricane aspect, what is, and this is in my mind, is that okay, it's like any type of fan or anything, I can only run up to a certain speed. At that point, I overdrive myself and I blow up.
Yeah.
Right? It's limiting factor. So that means they have to lock them in place.
Well, they don't lock them in place because then they really would bend in the wind and blow up.
Well, I mean, don't they
I think
lock
that-
the turbine so
You know,
they
again,
can stop turn?
I'm not sure. I do know that you get above a certain wind level and it doesn't function. I think it's somewhere around 35, 40 miles an hour. But I think they stopped producing electricity. But I thought they turned them loose and they just let it spin.
Well, no, because I've seen down there when it's high winds, it seems like when they're locked in place, always the one blade is center.
Okay,
in
well, that may
where
be
the
it.
pylon is.
That may be the most
And-
aerodynamically.
If they lock it in place, you can turn like a regular windmill. It can turn in the wind,
Gotcha.
but the blade, it's.
Okay,
you know,
that
they have
makes
lock
sense.
on,
Yeah.
but have they did a maximum speed with them like a hurricane force wind blowing out?
Let me tell you, one of the reasons that I'm really skeptical about this. Of course, again, State Corporation Commission is doing this review. They filed their application in November. I mean, there must be 10,000 pages of paperwork now. Dominions, the other side, questions. I'd say a good 10% of it is secret. It's redacted. It's blank. You look at blanks, you know, just black lines. That's the kind of stuff that they're covering up. They are not answering those questions. You can look through their entire filing. I've gone through their briefs. I do a word search. You don't find the word hurricane. It's not showing up. Another one you don't see is the right whales. You know, another issue of all this is going to be the right whales. And they go right off our coast. They'll be going right through these wind fields. Now, if we build one little one with 170 turbines, that's probably not going to affect the right whales.
We talk about running into them.
So it's the sound and the vibrations and then the electric pulses.
Yeah.
They don't know how the whales are going to react to that. Nobody knows.
Yeah, the REF.
Yeah, like I said, but again, if it's one fairly small area, they can sort of go around it. But if they do what the Biden administration wants to do, then they build 110 gigawatts, which will be like, you know, 2,000 to 3,000 turbines, 4,000 turbines. I don't know where the whale's gonna go. That's a whole nother issue.
Hey, Toby?
Who authorized making this turbine?
Your General Assembly. You mean in Virginia? Your General Assembly. Dominion asked. Don't blame Karen, she wasn't there.
Okay, Teresa?
Yes, we all know that ideology pushes people to get involved. But what about the money? Does your institute kind of follow where exactly, what foreign countries, what developers here in this area specifically to Virginia Beach, who's making the money out of all of it?
Well,
Because it's not us.
again, I mean, Thomas Jefferson Institute per se has not been doing a lot of the work on that. Steve Hayner, writing for Bacon's Rebellion, has done some of that work. And most of my focus has been on the power company, on Dominion. I mean, the names, it's Ørsted and it's Siemens. These are well-known companies, and Ørsted and Siemens have a lot of other products, and Siemens is a great German company. But they've been in this, when I was at the shipyard, we worked with Gamesa, which is a Spanish company. And now I think Siemens and Gamesa are Siemens Gamesa, they're one company. And again, I mean, I think, everybody accuses everybody. Hmm?
What about when they break
Can
down?
I make a
50 years?
suggestion?
Yes.
I was just gonna say, it doesn't matter what the subject matter is, and I totally agree with you, you have to look behind it. So it doesn't matter what company it is or website you go to the very bottom and look at the partners.
And the
Yeah,
investors.
sometimes.
Because you will see who is feeding them contribution money,
Well, and again,
and you'll see
Okay.
their
let
operation,
me, again,
their mode of operation.
she brings up a good point. So again, you go to another project elsewhere on Virginia's East Coast and look at how they structured it. So those companies, Siemens, Gamesa, or Ørsted, they own the wind farm. They are putting up the money to build it. They're not asking ratepayers to put up money up front. They build it with their own money. They get a contract for the electricity and they take the risk. So if a hurricane comes along and blows it off the face of the ocean, it's their money gone, not the ratepayers' money. I mean, the ratepayer is looking around how do I heat my house today? But at least he's not going to be paying for an electricity plant that disappeared. If Dominion's plant gets blown off the face of the earth, we'll keep paying for it for 20 years.
That's right. It will.
I mean, because they'll fight it out at the SCC, and we may not have to pay 100%. But they have the legal right to collect every dime they invest and every dime of profit on that money. So again, Ørsted and Gamesa, if they had been told, we're going to do an RFP, we're going to have anybody who wants to, here's the lease area, give us a proposal and tell us what price you'd sell the electricity for, and we'll take the best deal offered. I would be a lot less concerned about that. I still would not be that crazy about it, but I would not be on the warpath about that, because it'd be their money at risk, not my money at risk. That's a big difference.
Larry? And then you, you had your hand up. Oh, okay. So Larry, go ahead.
Okay, earlier you mentioned that you've had dinner with an economist who wrote the.
I probably shouldn't have said that, because
You said that his proposal showed that you had to have at least 60% backup in natural gas. The people that are shoving this down our throats, have they read that report that said you need to keep the natural gas?
well, no, well, the point I was making was, if you want to have these factories, if you want to make all the materials in the United States, you want to build the pylons, you want to build the turbines.
Yeah.
Those are huge. The turbines are made out of these polymers and these fancy plastics.
Yeah.
The turbines, I mean, the pylons are basically steel.
Mhm.
If you want to bend steel, you need to heat it up. You want to heat it up, natural gas is the best way to heat it up. At the shipyard, they have to heat up they heat up the steel.
The follow-on to that is, what company should I invest in now?
Well, in all honesty, I'd say this to them, I never tell people not to buy Dominion stock. Dominion makes money, so Dominion's not a bad stock to have. I mean, it's look, again, like I said, Ørsted and Siemens, had they been told to do it a different way, they would have done it a different way. This is what Dominion told them to do. We're going to build it, we're going to own it, you're just going to be a supplier.
Do
Teresa?
they think that they're gonna, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Do they think that they're going to be able to produce enough electricity with all of these turbines to run electric cars for everybody that has a car?
Well, they haven't really baked that in yet. And again, they haven't really baked that in. And again, keep in mind, it's not just an electric car. They want you to have an electric stove, electric furnace. You know, you can't, you know, they're probably going to come after my propane grill in the back, you know? And so again, it's not just the car. And again, there are people I know who have the car and they plug it into their house and the car serves as a battery. Power goes out, the car turns on their lights. But if they do that a couple of nights in a row, they can't drive to work because the car got drained. Today's cars need 6 to 8 hours to charge. You know, if you, that home charger, you plug it in overnight, that's what you have to do.
Try to take a plus credit.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, that's the.
I mean, you know, and I think, again, 50 years from now, I do believe there'll be a lot of electric cars out there.
Thousands of dollars.
But I just don't think it should be mandatory.
Right. Is this a done deal? Is there any way for us to kill it? Or the SEC to kill it?
I would say-
The General Assembly to kill it?
I would say the first wave of offshore wind is pretty much a done deal. We will see what happens, but I think the SEC has to approve it. And I don't think they'll be able to put any constraints on Dominion that scares Dominion off. So I think the offshore wind's a done deal. We have plenty of time to repeal RGGI. We have plenty of time to repeal that automobile thing. You know, the California Air Resources Board, we can repeal that.
Is Reggie an initial?
Yeah, why don't you explain that?
Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
Cap and trade.
RGGI. And we are one of about 12 states in the compact. And it's, you know, again, when they did it, there was no other way to lower carbon, but then we passed the VCEA, which is way stricter. But again, I think virtually everything else I've talked about, if the General Assembly changes tenor, I think we can do something about it. And the best bill this year was actually put in by my friend Lee Ware. And it didn't actually repeal RGGI because the votes probably were not there to repeal RGGI, but this was a bill that we were trying to get some Democrats to pay attention. And it said, you can have your offshore wind, you can have your solar, but you got to go to the SEC and make your case. It took out the language that said it was mandatory, that it was automatically in the public interest. And they'd have to go to the SEC. And I think if the SEC had that kind of authority, they would rein a lot of it in. They would say, well, you know, you can have this much offshore wind, but too much of offshore wind and you're messing with the grid. We're not going to do that. Too much solar and you're messing with the grid. But the SEC's been taken out of the equation. They've lost their authority. So, but again,
Teresa, you had another question?
It's just a simple one that, if you can prove that you said that they redacted a lot, if you can prove that they've been deliberately deceptive to the American public, is there like criminal charges or something?
well, again, when they redact it, the SEC can still see it. The judges can read what's in the redaction. Your attorney general, your local friend, Jason Miyares, he's involved in all these cases. His staff gets a chance to see what's hidden. They see it, but they're sworn to secrecy. They can't discuss it. If they have a hearing on it before the judges, people like me get thrown out of the courtroom. I can't listen to the hearing. You know, so yeah, I think if it was like a gigantic smoking gun, but it may be. I mean, we don't know. I mean, if it is, Jason Miyares can't tell you because he signed an agreement not to discuss it. So again, I think that's a huge. I have a piece circulating. I'm trying to get a paper to run it. And the very first point I make is the secrecy. I think the secrecy itself. I mean, if they won't tell us what's really going on, if there's that much of it hidden, then we should not approve it. It's a pig in a poke, is what it is.
Somebody asked over here, it's not foilable then? It's
No, this
protected?
is, again, the judges themselves will prove the secrecy. Dominion asked for it. I mean, Dominion files a petition
I have
saying,
a question, how much is Dominion gonna put up for all these people that aren't gonna be able to pay for all this? Because somebody's gonna have to
Oh,
pay
what?
for all this.
no.
Oh, yes, I'm going to,
Pick up your electric bill
I do.
and look at, wait a minute, look on the back. And there's a little charge down there and you'll see PIPP, PIP, percentage of income payment plan. And right now it's going to show you like 1 cent or 2 cents because they haven't started it yet. The percentage of income payment plan is a income supplement for low income folks to say that you don't have to pay more than 6% of your bill of your income for electricity. If your electric bill is more than 6% of your income, PIPP will pay it. It'll come out of this PIP fund. And again, who's putting money in the PIP fund?
We are.
We are. It's going to be a part of your electric bill is going to be this transfer payment to this PIPP plan. And that's going to help people, the really poor folks, pay their electric bills.
Anybody else? have a
23.
question? Okay, this gentleman can ask a question.
Quick answer to hers is 2023. It should be 2023, the real PIP plan should kick in.
I live in Sandbridge and we are ground central for all of this stuff that's coming on shore. Dominion came a couple of years ago and checked with the Civic League frequently saying, well, it's going to take a while and you're going to pay 9% more about every year. And eventually this will all benefit your heirs. Because the rates are never going to go down. We're paying for all that all the way for what they said, but they were at least nice about it.
Well,
They dragged theirs through Camp Pendleton, their cables, for the first two. And they crossed over an Avon Grid. If you heard of Avon Grid, that's the Global Links. They're a big internet company. They're bringing cables from Brazil, Indonesia, Europe. They're going out to Corporate Landing where they're going to put theirs in. Sandbridge will be a combat zone starting in November. The north end of the parking lot in Sandbridge will be closed for the interlinks drilling, which will be lateral, which will not trench like Avon Grid, the electric people plan to. And they'll be hopefully out of there by March.
So you're talking about internet cables,
That's the internet guys.
not electric
Then
cables.
Avon Grid came along.
Yeah, now they're. gonna
These
build
are
electric plants.
Scottish Power through Boston to a company, Avon Grid, owned by the Spanish. They have been very terrible and very deceptive. Their proposal was to do what they needed to do over a space of 17 months. But they promised to say, okay, you've got a tourist season and a skinny little roadway, and it's the only way in and out. Because Dan Mack says, we're not opening up for you guys anymore. So they said 17 months. Well, they're only going to do maybe 5.5, 6 months worth of work. Divide that into your 17, compounded by whatever is going to slow down the process. And it's going to be 5 to 7 years before Sandbridge will.
Well, they haven't really started applying for that
Well, they're working on it.
There's
And they're
nothing
talking
pending.
about deception.
yet. Yeah.
They said all they wanted to do was bring it in Little Island, trench all the way up Sandpiper Road. When they trench, it's 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep. And that's,
But they are gonna bury it.
they're gonna bury it,
Okay.
but there's no standard in the world for what happens with that residual stuff. Whether your Uncle Louie's going to the beach by the market sometime and his pacer kicks off. I mean, there's a great deal of opposition to getting some information, and they have been very deceptive in dealing with it, as has the city. The city said, we didn't know about this. Well, they've been talking to both those cable outfits for over 2 years.
I queried the State Corporation Commission, and they do not have any petition, in any form from those people at all.
Good. 'Cause
And they're gonna need SCC approval to do any of that stuff.
Anybody else have a question? I was wondering one thing, when I went to the forum that they had down at Lynn Haven now over there, right? And I asked the Navy guys there, because they were against offshore drilling when it was oil, right? And that was just one oil rig. How are they okay with all of those windmills? Isn't that going to do something with the shipping lanes?
Again, if they do just the one project, it's a disruption, but if they do all those projects, it's huge.
You know, we have the Port of Virginia besides, you know,
Well,
the
that's right,
military.
that's right.
Yeah.
Again, when you build the turbines and they're all around, you will have a ship channel left, but the ship channel and will be the whale channel, because that's the only thing whales can go through too. So again, that's what happens to the whales is they get hit by ships.
Right.
It's look, I don't think they've thought it all through. They're gonna make their money and be gone, and in 20 years,
Who's
we'll
gonna
be
make
doing
the money?
it. Dominion and Orsted and Gamesa and all those guys.
Yep.
And again,
Yes, you have one more question?
I do. How will that affect our defense? Because you said you work at the shipyard, you know, we have a naval
Yeah.
station there. I mean, if they build this huge compound, how, you know, have they looked into that study?
I don't,
Defense readiness?
I think they get a different, At the end of the day, bless their hearts, even the 4 stars salute and do what they're told to do. Okay?
Yeah, they were told,
And
we're good.
they woke up.
Great energy.
Well said.
They're woke.
And they're getting that from this White House.
Boston is very.
And I'm not sure they got a whole lot. I mean, again, I'm not sure the previous White House was all that, Mr. Trump has his issues with this. He's got some problems with what these guys want to do. Again, whether he's coming back in 4 years, I don't know, but I do say this. If Biden gets another term, you're gonna see it all. Or
Bite
Biden,
your tongue.
or, you know. Well, again, and they could put in Mr. Newsom, and Mr. Newsom would really put, after Mr. Newsom, you'd be saying, bring back Biden, please.
All right, let's thank him for coming. All about this.